What do you think the public ought to know about the Green Party?
Well, one of the things, reasons I'm here, even though I'm not a candidate, is to support a team that has been consistent and had integrity for many, many decades. I recently was at a program dealing with the fundraiser for the Black Agenda Report, and their analysis was strictly this, that nobody should vote for the Democrats because they have absolutely betrayed what they claim to stand for. They are not the so-called loyal opposition. They are a traitorous party, and the second analysis was that the so-called black middle class has become a traitorous class within the Democratic Party. And if this analysis can be proven, the recent legislation that allowed them to do away with the food stamps for working people who make money but not enough to feed their families, there were Democrats who voted right along with Republicans for that. So to say that they are traitorous is a mild criticism. And I think I've always been one of those people, if I can't have justice, I get revenge. So I would say to people, you have no choice but to support a party like the Green Party. You need to look at their 10 values. You need to look at their record in terms of fighting for ecology. You need to look at their record in terms of dealing with social justice issues, such as the immigrants. And I think you would come to the same conclusion that any rational person does that really cares about what's going on in this country. You look at the analysis that the Green Party gives in terms of hedge funds, in terms of taxing the rich and not the poor. It's a no-brainer. So that's why I would agree that people should give the Green Party a chance. Just walk in there and, fill in that circle and pay close attention to the name of the candidate. Make sure you're getting the candidate that you want, because they're deliberately making it difficult for us to understand what's going on when we walk into that voting booth. I remember what one of the scientists that was retired and lived in Florida during the last election in Florida when Bush stole the election. He said you literally had to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to vote. And he said he was still confused. I think we're going to see that kind of situation developing in New York City as well. If we can make this country hold to the standards for itself that it's trying to hold Syria to, we could get our political prisoners out by next year. And I'm dedicated to that, because many of the legislation that we consider progressive that they are now trying to reverse is a result of these so-called political prisoners. They went in the 60s fighting for justice, social rights, and human rights. And I feel I have to be true to them because I benefited from their sacrifice. So depending on that will depend on whether or not I have the time to fight back at the government for what they're doing. They have literally stolen our country. One of the interesting things is the only analysis of what's been happening in terms of the security system and the way it's encroaching on our lives is coming from the Green Party. Nobody gave an analysis of the National Defense Authorization Act, such as the Green Party. Nobody exposed the role of the corporations and people like Coke in terms of causing these kinds of legislations to go through more than the Green Party. Maybe perhaps the Black Agenda Report, but the Black Agenda Report would be the first ones to tell you, don't vote Democrat or Republican. Our job is to get out here and make people feel they have hope. The biggest problem right now is most people are not voting. And that is a serious problem. One of the worst things the Obama purple Kool-Aid phase did was it has now disenchanted and made cynical our college group, because they came out in numbers and voted for him, and now they see what a sham our political structure really is. So we've got to get those young people back, and you've got to do it by showing you have integrity and by showing you got the guts to go out and say it and do it.
So you're a candidate for what office there? 6th district?
The 6th district, council district. That's takes in much of the west side of Manhattan. I was born in that district. I lived most of my life there, and I've seen how that area has been almost totally gentrified. If I were to want to get another apartment in that district, I wouldn't be able to afford it. The only reason that I can afford to live there right now is because I've been living in my apartment for 42 years, and it's a rent-controlled apartment. If it weren't for rent control, rent stabilization, and some of the like Michelama buildings they have there would be no working and middle-class people living in that district. They have this sham going on called inclusionary zoning, so that if a big real estate developer wants to put up still another luxury high-rise building that we are swamped with already on the west side, if they agree to reserve maybe 20% of the units for, in quote, affordable units, then they can put aside the zoning regulations and build even higher monstrosities. This, of course, has a stressful effect on the environment as well, but are those apartments really affordable? Well, affordable as defined by this program is the average median income of the particular district. The average median income of my district is well over $100,000 a year. You can apply as for one of those affordable units if your income is 80% of that average income, or say $80,000. That means that there will be so-called affordable units available to people making $80,000 a year. You know that those units are going to be like $2,000 or $3,000 a month. And the few units that they will have for really low-income people will be small studios in the bottom of the building in the back, certainly not big enough for families. So most of the so-called affordable units will be not affordable for those people who need those units the most. And all of the candidates, certainly all of my Democratic contenders for that, for this district, the Working Families Party, Mark Landis, and the Democratic Party, Helen Rosenthal, they support inclusionary zoning. And yet they say that they are for affordable housing, and they bemoan the fact that there isn't any really for middle-class people. This also affects small business, this gentrification, because the rents are getting so high that small business, mom and pop stores are leaving the district one after another. And here again, the Democrats, they're always talking about supporting small business, but they have no real program to protect small business. I'm the only candidate that advocates rent control for small business. The rent guidelines board hearing, well, that's a yearly exercise in theater. They know ahead of time. You know, the rent guidelines board determines the rent for 1 million rent stabilized apartments. That's the biggest hunk of affordable housing in New York City. How do they make this determination? First of all, the people who are on the board are selected by the mayor, and these appointments are not approved by the city council. Now, the mayor is supposed to have 2 representatives representing landlords, 2 representatives representing tenants, and I believe 3 representatives who are supposed to be neutral. But they're never really neutral. So no matter what the economy is, this rent guidelines board has never decided not to have a rent increase. Not only not to have a rent increase, but they've always approved rent increases that far exceed inflation. So working class people are hit by these increases. Of course, they always drag up some landlord who had the misfortune of owning a small brownstone that needs a lot of work and is not doing very well. But the overwhelming majority of landlords in this city are big landlords. They own many, many buildings. They're making a killing because as rent-regulated tenants move out, they die or whatever, those apartments are easily decontrolled and go to market rate. So they're making a lot of money. They don't have to open up their books to the Rents Guidelines Board. Even though we're lucky that we are not on market rent, nevertheless, these increases are a great burden to the people who are in regulated housing. And so they have these hearings, and these different tenant groups show up and they scream and they yell, and sometimes they manage to even shut down the hearing. But it's a done deal anyway, and the people on the Rent Guidelines Board, they're paid to sit there and take this abuse. They're willing to do it, and they come up with an increase that's totally unfair.
What can we learn about Lota from the way he managed the MTA?
It's not only that he managed the MTA, the fact that he's a Republican is enough to dissuade any politically conscious working class person from voting for this guy. And by the way, don't get fooled by de Blasio. He says that he's for the middle class, he's for small business, he's against gentrification, he's for raising taxes on the rich. But so are all the other Democrats. They always say these things. But their real boss is the same boss that Lota and his Republicans have. And that boss is Wall Street. That's where they get the money from. So no matter who gets in, whether it's de Blasio or Lota, we're going to get hit in the back with programs that are not in our interest.
Hi, I'm John Reynolds, and I'm running on the Green Party line, Green Party ticket for New York City Council, District 11 in the Northwest Bronx. And I'm running on a green eco-socialist program and for radical reform of our city government and for meeting the people's needs and not making profits for the 1%, but for the meeting the needs of the 99%. Green Party generally stands for a radically progressive platform. For example, the Green Party stands for public education that is free, universal, quality education from pre-K through graduate school. We stand for free CUNY and open admissions, as we used to have for many decades. We are coming out strongly against charter schools and against the privatization of schools.
What's that all about, that charter stuff? Is that to avoid the kids who parents are rent control?
It's well, charter schools are dividing our communities. Instead of putting money and effort into fixing our broken, those schools that are failing, parents are misled into thinking that the answer is to get into a lottery and get your kids into a charter school. We should be fixing our public schools, not investing in charter schools. We stand for universal rent control for all tenants and a tenant's bill of rights. We stand for jobs for all New Yorkers who want a job, jobs or income for all. There's plenty of work to do in building a green infrastructure economy, and we need a public power company, not private companies such as Con Edison who work for their shareholders, not for the general public interest.
I am a candidate for New York City Comptroller, running on the Green Party line. My name is Julia Willebrand, and I'm delighted to be here being interviewed by Joe Friendly.
Oop, my hat got in the way. So you were thinking of wearing a hat like this, huh? Have you noticed that we got a problem that the two-party system doesn't quite make democracy happen?
It doesn't even make any sense to call it a two-party system anymore. It's a duopoly. It is a corporatocracy. It is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the corporations and particularly the finance corporations nowadays. The duopoly has created a ballot where the Democratic Party and the Republican Party jointly approve of all this, in which they each have a full line with their name next to each other, line 1 and line 2, and then the rest of the Green Party, for instance, which is the third large party with ballot status, is on line 6. So on line 6 you will find the Green Party candidate at the top of the ballot, and then you will find 2 or 3 other candidates underneath. Then go to Comptroller candidate. You'll find me, and then you'll find 2 or 3 other people underneath. And anybody wanting to vote Green who doesn't know exactly who the Green Party is very likely to screw up that ballot and vote incorrectly. The other thing, and the other thing is, it's in 6-point type, i.e. font, and therefore there's all kinds of mistakes are going to happen that way. And once upon a time, when we had a machine voting system, you could not make the mistake of voting for 2 candidates for the same office. The machine wouldn't allow you to do that, but the ballot does allow you to do that. And what happens is the machine, after you have deposited your vote, the machine will then throw your vote out. So even if you only made a mistake in one office, all the offices are gone.
That doesn't sound legal to me.
No, it doesn't sound legal. Brennan Center, do you hear me? Do you hear us? Please do something. Go to court. Sue. They should throw the whole thing out and hold a new election.
No, really, if you make a mistake with respect to one candidate, then that particular race you could argue, but why all the rest? It's crazy.
Well, that's what we're told is going to happen. Now, if the machine is programmed that way, because after all it is a machine, and it's a machine created out of software from a couple of profit-making corporations who are in the business of doing this, so who knows what their purposes are.
What would you be doing different if you're the Comptroller?
The Comptroller is charged by law with protecting the financial health of the city of New York. Now, obviously, one of the first things that Comptroller should be doing is checking to see that there are enough dollars to pay the 300,000 New York City employees that work for the city. Those are the people that clean our streets, put out our fires, drive our ambulances, teach our kids. It's important that the money be there for those bills to be paid. Unfortunately, there's an endless drain on the taxes. That, in fact, is how the money gets into the budget to pay for all of those services we all get every single day. But those taxes are being drained for special purposes. Developers get subsidies. It's estimated that last year, $2 billion of the $70 billion budget went to developers to subsidize their creation of housing, luxury housing. And another way they do it is, for instance, the New York City Housing Authority, which provides low-income citizens with housing, offered the developers the playgrounds in the city housing projects, offered them the opportunity to develop their 80-story luxury condos. And after they were offered that opportunity, once they accept one of those offers and put up a building, the city provides them with zoning variances so that they can exceed the limits that they're supposed to be. The city provides them with a variety of other subsidies. And then finally, the city provides them with a 20-year tax abatement. Now, a 20-year tax abatement means, for instance, the Russian oligarch recently bought an $80 million condo for his daughter, who was a student at Columbia, the equivalent of a Columbia dorm at $80 million. And since it was a brand new building with all of its tax abatement and other subsidies, that owner of that $80 billion condo got a 20-year tax abatement. In other words, they get to live service-free, welfare for the billionaires. They're not paying for the sanitation, the fire, the ambulances, or anything else. That's our dollar, not their dollar. So, as Comptroller, I would create a Department of Public Outrage. That department would have the responsibility of, in fact, producing a weekly newsletter, the Outrage of the Week, because I'm quite sure we could probably do an Outrage of the Day, but an Outrage of the Week where the public, the taxpayers, the citizens of this city are informed about the drain on the city's coffers from the 1%. And I would have a running meter on it where they would know each day of the year how much more has been added, or actually has been subtracted, from the money that pays us our health care and our teachers and so forth. Subtracted from that money to provide these people, the 1%, with free services.
Your name on the ballot again?
Julia Willebrand, line 6, Green Party, Comptroller. If you want change, vote Green.
Hi, I'm Tony Gronowicz. I'm running for mayor on the Green Party. because we have a crisis in this city, a crisis of confidence, a crisis of resources, and it's all because the 1% has cornered 45% of the assets in this city, greater than any time since slave days. And people are hurting. And we have a mayor who is lauding this quality, this situation that we have here. He's also a mayor that was clueless about Sandy. He wanted to hold the marathon, and we're still dealing with the devastation and the people being put out of their homes a year later. And so the Democrat candidate, de Blasio, was clueless about this, because he said when he heard that the mayor wanted to run the marathon, oh, that's a great idea. But then his advisors said, hey, maybe that's not such a great idea. So he also was insensitive to the needs of the people in terms of the environmental disaster that Sandy represented and still poses today, because this is not going to go away. It's going to get worse, since they really have no plan. I should say plan of action. They do a lot of talking. Another point to make is that Bloomberg, when he came to office, promised 180,000 new units of housing, but right now homelessness is at a record. We also have the situation of the stock market at a record. So the two are connected most intimately, because the stock market is at a record high to attract foreign investors, essentially, to the portfolios of the major multinationals here. But we have not collected the stock transfer tax, which we collected from 1905 to 1980. Actually, we've collected it, but we have rebated it back to the owners of the companies who were taxed. That would raise $16 billion a year. And that is something that we could definitely use. We wouldn't have a deficit. But it stopped when Reagan, Koch, and Cuomo were the president, mayor, and governor of New York State. In 1980 it stopped. It was there for 75 years, through thick and thin, through 2 world wars and a Great Depression. And yet the tax was collected. So why is it being rebated back to the 1%? So it shows you the power they have to starve the public sector. Closing hospitals is wrong. St. Vincent's closed down, very important hospital in the village, to create luxury condos. The thing that distinguishes us, the Greens, from other parties is that we don't accept big real estate money, or even any real estate money, and money from Wall Street and corporations. And that's why it's tough for us to break in when the Campaign Finance Board says that running for mayor, I have to have had at the beginning $250,000 raised in order to qualify for their stage debates, in which they don't talk about real issues. And the real issues are jobs, education, housing, healthcare, and the environment. I mean, with respect to housing, de Blasio was city council person for the Fort Greene area, where the Barclays Center arena was proposed. And he okayed it on the grounds that affordable housing would be provided. And Bruce Ratner, the architect of this project, I shouldn't say the architect, the guy who put it all together, the financial architect, which, I mean, that's degrading the word architect. He said, oh, that's great, I'm going to throw you a 50th birthday party, which he did for de Blasio. And guess what? The Barclays Center's been up for a year, and there's not one affordable housing unit has been built, even though it was promised at the time. And as public advocate, wouldn't you know it, de Blasio was essentially absent and not advocating, not just for this, but for anything else. So he has been basically a no-show as a public advocate in the public eye. And that's not what he should have been doing. He was just biding his time, because the Clintons had 2 horses in the race. One of them was Weiner, and we know what happened to him, and he was the front runner for a while. And the second was de Blasio, who was Hillary's campaign manager in 2000. De Blasio can promise what he wants, but I always say, let's look at the record and not the rhetoric. People judge by appearances, as Machiavelli said, and they know that, and they judge by the rhetoric and promises, but they are not inclined to look at the record, and the record is pretty bad. So that's why I'm running for mayor, to correct the situation.
What can you say about LOTA?
LOTA's a tool of the 1%. The rich in this city, the people who compare one another, how many clubs and which clubs they belong to, that seems to be their main concern. They have so much money. That's all they talk about. Are very much in favor of LOTA and Kelly and Bloomberg because they're part of the 1% and they want to continue lording it over everyone else and luxuriating while the majority of the inhabitants of this city are suffering. And that's just plain wrong.
How you doing? My name is Trevor. I'm running for City Council in the 12th District.
And what kind of hopes you got in case when you win, what would you be doing? What would you be pushing for?
Well, I'll be pushing for education, housing, and basically social justice. You know, in my district, there's a lot of problems that's situated and come along with the territory, and I don't think the political agenda that's there right now is really addressing that.
Is there some corruption around that you have issues with?
Well, you know, there's always corruption, but the thing about it is at the city council level, there's place where you can actually make change and have change be made, because since you write legislation and you have some type of funding to do something with the monies that do come into the city, I believe there's a lot that you can do.
It ain't getting done.
And it's not getting done, that's for sure.
How about the police?
Well, the police have a hard enough job, but I think what's happening now is that they're getting a leniency to do whatever they need to do whenever they want to do it. And just like with stop and frisk, it's not like stop and frisk just came about. Stop and frisk has been here for when my father was small, but you know, they didn't call it that at that time. I think they basically just put stop and frisk just to give it a title so they got something that they can put on the books and say that this is what we have you on, and you know, another way to railroad you into something that you know you don't really need.
What do you think ought to be done about marijuana?
Well, I grew up in the time where everything was free and good, but I don't think legalizing marijuana is a game changer. But I don't think right now we have the political backing and the political people in place to actually regulate it to say that, yeah, we can legalize it. Basically, if we're looking at human rights, if we're looking about human integrity, you know, there really is no deviating from that. What's good for you is good for me, and what happens to you sooner or later will happen to me.
How about the situation of political prisoners?
Political prisoners, that's an issue that at the city council level I don't think that I would address, but I do have a personal feeling on that, and I'll just keep it personal right now.
Oh, okay. Free Mumia.
Yes. I do believe that though. I do understand that, and I do believe, yeah, free.
What do you think about 9/11?
9/11.
Should we be worried about, do we create terrorism by making enemies out there?
I think we create terrorism by putting fear into the public. And that's the thing, that's what the political agenda is right now. It's putting fear into the public, saying that
rule by fear.
Yeah, basically, because it's easier to fear me more than to love me. So it's, you know, you live longer, you last longer, and you keep your position wherever you're at longer.
Could you see any clues to the way LOTA ran the MTA? I
really couldn't comment on that because that was a whole different I don't know all his agendas and what he was into with that, because the MTA shut down for a while, so I really don't even know. I just know that when it comes to the MTA, it affects the public school system, and when it affects the public school, you know, it's a different situation. Because now you're telling me we don't have no money for the MTA, for the kids to have bus passes to get on the MTA, and that is a real hard problem for me, because now you're depriving my child of an education because I live more than a mile away.
What's the downside of your opposition?
The downside of my opposition is that he was put in place, I would say. Because I'm not saying that he's a bad guy or anything like that, but he was just put in there, and I don't think he has the total grasp of what's happening in the community and what his district really needs. The thing with have to offer is that I'm a fresh voice, I'm an independent voice, and I believe that I have a better grasp because my kids are still in that community. They have activities, they got Girl Scouts, they got track, all in that community. And this is a thing that I really believe is really needed because it's the local level, and no change happens unless you start at the local level.
Have you now, or have you ever been a member of the Green Party?
I've always been a member of the Green Party. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Yes. Nice to meet you.
And why was that, buddy? What'd you join up for?
Oh, me?
Wait. Do you know why you joined the Green Party?
A lot of reasons.
Like what?
Well, my mom was already in the Green Party, so he had to be in the Green Party. And then also when he was young, what?
Why did she join? Did she sort of think green?
She went to protests. She went to jail a lot, and when he was young, his mom told him about who was it?
Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader. You take it from there.
I'll take it from there. It's so funny. So yeah, so I've always been a proud Green Party member from when I first heard about Ralph Nader and the Green Party in 2000. I told somebody earlier today that I hadn't voted for 17 years. I didn't vote until I was 35 years old when I found out about Ralph Nader and the Green Party. And finally, it felt like that was a party that actually represented my views and represented issues and values that I thought were vital to the survival of America. I mean, I just see that the major two-party system and the way that they sort of bend over to please the corporate interests and not the people has always been an issue for me. So finding out the Green Party has been a great thing. And once you register green, it doesn't stop at the ballot box. Once you register green, usually a Green Party member that's ahead of some committee will reach out to you and try to get you involved in some events that are going on with the Green Party, whether it's a protest or a meeting. And then you find out about things you could do at the local level to help create a green world. So it's really been great and something that I treasure, and I try to encourage people to register green whenever they can, and at least just register independent, non-affiliated, you know, because you don't want to be tied to a party that you don't believe in, you know. It's important to vote. If you don't find a party that feels the way that you feel, then register independent if anything. But you definitely should register, and you definitely should vote and become informed.
He doesn't understand the hat?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Fracking ruins our water.
Yeah, you know about fracking, right?
Yes.
He's like, yes, of course. He's 8 years old. He knows all about fracking.
I'm in 3rd grade. Of course I do.
Tell us about fracking. What is fracking?
Well, it's when people drill into the bedrock and it ruins the water because a lot of the gasoline goes into the fresh water and a lot of the water stays down there. So
yeah,
the chemicals ruin it.
Pretty much, yeah. And they're actually drilling through the rock, right? And they're using chemicals and water to push all that pressure in there, and somehow magically it's supposed to not leave polluted waters, but it always does.
It releases methane.
Right, it releases methanes and a lot of other toxins. And you know, this is one of those things as public advocate, we have these industries that are trying to push this through New York State, and even New York City, there's these gas lines that are trying to pump in from the west side of Manhattan and from below Brooklyn. And we've been out there protesting. The Green Party have been large vocal advocates against these practices of fracking and against all these toxins that they're trying to introduce into our public, and they feel that that's fine. I mean, I can go through a whole list. I don't want to use this time to do that, but if you have any specific questions.
If you were to bet money, which way would you say Cuomo's going to go?
Cuomo, well, you know, Cuomo is a peculiar guy because I think he's going to let everybody wait for the longest time until he finally says, you know what, it's taken so long to make a decision, I think I'm going to make a decision to allow fracking. You know, because what they'll do is they'll make such a delay that they feel like everything is backed up, nothing's getting done, and there's all these millions of dollars getting lost and not having fracking. So then the only alternative at that point is a fracking, rather than using this time now to look for alternative fuel sources that are not toxic and are not going to kill people. We have solar
panels on our roof.
Oh yes, we just got solar panels on our roof to show you how green we are. but so that's the tactic that I feel that a lot of people will do this delay. They'll delay, they won't tell you right off how they feel about something, how they want to vote for something. So what they do is with that delay, it makes things get to a critical point, and then they have to make a decision. And the decision is always for where can we make the most money fast. So my name is James Lane. I'm running for public advocate on the Green Party line.
Wait, let's do that thing again. Okay. Ready, go.
Okay, my name is James Lane.
AKA Victor Gamble.
He says AKA Victor Gamble because he's very proud that this year I was able to find my birth mother, my original mother. I found out that I was adopted at the age of 23 when both of my parents had passed away. And it took me about 25 years of searching. I had to go through many routes, and I finally... No, I was 23 years old when I found out that I was adopted. Both my parents had passed away, and I found adoption papers in a safe deposit box. And at that time, I asked the Surrogate Court, Department of Vital Records, and a lot of other, city agencies, well, where can I find information on about my original mother? I want to reach out to her, let her know I'm okay. If she's still alive or not. I want to know about her. And every place I turned, it was a brick wall after brick wall, slammed doors. You cannot find out anything about your adoption. And that was something that just really, I can't even tell you. Like, till this day, it bothers me. Even now, after I found my birth mother and my half sisters and cousins, and it's been a great experience, but I can't fully enjoy it because there's millions of other adoptees around this country that are not able to get that information just because of whatever person in Albany or wherever is blocking a simple piece of legislation to go through to allow these adult adoptees to gain access to their birth records.
So you met your mother?
I've met her. She's doing fine. Actually, she's had a tough time. She had a tough life. Ever since she gave me up for adoption, she told me for 48 years, every April when I was born, she would go through a deep depression, and she prayed every day that she would see me before she died.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a lot to bear. And when I think about that, I try not to get too emotional during these interviews, knowing that this is so against what people are telling you in the street about, well, no, people gave up their children for adoption because they don't want to be contacted by them. If you reach out to them, you're going to mess up their whole worlds. And in many cases, I'd see about 99% of the cases, the mothers that have given up their children, they've had to go through that really tough choice. It's not an easy choice to give up your child for adoption. But they've done so because of the situations that they were in were so crucial.
Is there language in pending legislation that gives the parent the option?
Well, there is a pending legislation right now. It's a bill A909 that has a lot of Democratic support in Albany, and I think even some Republicans have signed on to it. But there's one particular assemblywoman from Brooklyn, her name is Helene Weinstein, who's blocking this from making it to the floor. She's the head of the Judiciary Committee. And so it's one of those clear examples on how a politician who's supposed to represent the general public, a politician's personal feelings or whatever interest is blocking a bill that has a lot of support from other elected officials to push this through, just for a vote, just asking for a vote. That's all they want. It's written, has the support. It could probably pass, which is probably what the concern is, but she's blocking this. So, I call out to Helen Weinstein to do the right thing and to let this bill make it to the vote, make it to the floor for a vote. I mean, that's what she was elected to do. And if she doesn't do that, I hope people in her district vote her out of office, because that's not the type of politician we should have. We should have politicians that respect the rights of the people and to do the will of the people. A lot of politicians will throw around the idea of transparency. The public needs to know transparency about our process, transparency about issues that affect them. But to this day, I have not seen a level of transparency that is relevant to the issues that are affecting us now. You know, for example, Bill de Blasio talks about stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is something that was going on for the 4 years that he was our public advocate. People have been complaining about stop and frisk situations, but he's done nothing as public advocate to put a change to that system. And I feel that that is really a simple thing to do. You need to get into the police departments and you know, right now the city council appointed, I think, an independent inspector general. Guess what? That's what your public advocate should have been. Your public advocate is your independent inspector general to make sure these city agencies are functioning, and they're functioning in a proper human and civil way. And so where was Bill de Blasio? You know, and so this is one of the reasons why I've been campaigning even harder for these final days leading up to this election, because I feel that if that was his record as our public advocate, who knows what little he'll do as our mayor. I mean, there's a lot of issues, you know, he talks about this tale of two cities, you know, about this imbalance between, you know, the wealthy and the people that are struggling to survive. Once again, you know, as public advocate, what was he doing during these 4 years? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to make changes here. Our city budget, for example, we have budgets to spend $13 million for a runoff election between two Democrats that wanted to run for public advocate, even though one of them was already on the working families line. So that was $13 million we could have saved if the Democratic candidate that wanted to run on the working families line realized that horror, that we're spending this money to do this runoff, even though she's on the ballot in November. These are the things that I'm running against, this waste of spending. And then on top of that, we just sent out a voter's guide. The Campaign Finance Board sends out a voter guide, and they don't talk to our city board of elections to see who's actually the candidates that are going to be on the ballot, because now this voter guide comes out and Daniel Squadron, who was one of the candidates running for public advocate on the Democratic line, who got knocked off the ballot as a result of that runoff election, is still showing up in the voter's guide in the space that I would have been appearing. So it's so these problems with our government, with our city government, has always been an issue for me. And it's not something I just thought about this year that I wanted to do. I thought about running for public advocate 4 years ago when we were running Billy Talon for mayor. I wanted to run as public advocate then, but I just had my son. Well, we just had our son. He's only 4 years old then. And it was really more important to, you know, raise him the way that we wanted to. And this year, even, it's kind of tough juggling a day job, you know, helping to raise an 8-year-old and running for office. But he's been great. He's been helping me out on the campaign trail. You see, he comes and helps out with interviews, and he helps me do camera work now and then. He's having a break right now. Oh, he's coming back. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of inconsistencies with what the city can do for its people and what it chooses to do for its people. The city has a lot of money in its resources. It has millions of dollars to spend in its campaign finance matching funds program. You know, we have Democratic candidates that are raising hundreds of thousands of dollars that are getting matched 6 to 1, so it equates to millions of dollars for campaigns. But for some reason or another, they're defunding my son's school because he doesn't have like 50 students to a classroom. You know, I know it's an exaggeration, but that's kind of like what Bloomberg would like. You know, he would like to see ridiculously sized classrooms because he wants to operate the schools in such a way that it's like an assembly line. And when you have an assembly line tactic to running your schools, you have assembly line individuals that come out of there, and they don't really come out with like free thought or more innovative ways of thinking. They actually are just good enough to hopefully pass high school, but they don't usually go on to succeed in college.
So statistically, they've studied that, and that backs you up totally.
Yeah, and so yeah, so there's statistics for it, and I wish I actually had the statistics, and that's a fault of me because I don't have all those figures. But, and I know, and I feel that, you know, yeah. Exactly. And then when you have that, when you have a student that just graduated high school and they're trying to get a job, but they can't really get like a really good job because they have a college education, they have to go for the service jobs, you know, working at fast food stores and whatever. And those jobs are usually offered at below living wage. If you don't want to get that job, then the other alternative is to go into the military, because the military offers an alternative for you as, yes, we'll pay for your college and we'll have a place for you. But you know what? That's not really a great job. That is just a solution to just get somebody off the street and
That's
to...
just the solution, probably get yourself killed so you can't even go to college.
Right, that's my son's quotes. It's a solution to get yourself killed and you can't even go to college, you know? It's just another way to pump more resources into this bloated military budget. To say, look, we need more money because we have more soldiers, we have to equip them more, you know? What we need to do is, oh, this is more of a national discussion, but we need to decrease our military spending. We need to bring our troops home and to bring these resources back to our country. And you know what? All these deficits that we're encountering right now can easily be fixed by reducing this military budget. We have a lot of budgets. You know, we have money to bail out banks rather than bailing out the people that were being affected by the horrible practices from these banks. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm running, and there's a lot of issues I'd like to fix. A lot of them are focused around the unfair practices of the wealthy and the greedy against the working and struggling and surviving in the city. So, I mean, I could go on for hours.
You just said the wealthy and the greedy, which is sort of the same thing.
Well, you know, there are wealthy that aren't greedy. There's far and few of those.
You mean them together, I think, when you said
Yeah.
you weren't making a distinction.
Yeah.
Because if they're wealthy, they're keeping all the money to themselves, which means they're greedy.
Yeah, but there are a few people that are wealthy that actually do a lot of good philanthropic work.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I don't like to lump them into that group. I mean, you know,
I have a social question for you.
You have a social question for me. What's your social question? Come closer to me,
And the first
so we can hear you.
I know this. It's in the Magic Treehouse book. They have the dragon. In the first dynasty, what was the emperor's name?
Oh, that's a good question. Tell me.
Emperor Quinn.
Emperor Quinn. Very good.
And he was known as the Dragon King.
And what did he do as a Dragon King?
He was greedy.
He was greedy? Okay, so we have to wrap up.
Green and greedy.
All right, so thank you so much for this interview.
Spell out your name.
Oh, James Lane, Jameslane.
Take 3.
Hi, my name is Randy Credico, and I am a candidate for mayor of New York City. November 5th, we will have an election. I'm a registered Democrat, but I am running on an independent line called an independent body called Tax Wall Street Party. I'm on the Tax Wall Street Party. I ran in the primary against 7 other Democrats, and I actually got 2.2% of the vote without spending a nickel, you know, except for to get signatures on the petitions to qualify. So without spending any money on advertising, being shut out of a lot of debates and a lot of forums, I still was able to get more votes than some of the established candidates. So I am taking that message into the general election, which I gave during the primary season. Because of my participation in many of these forums and 3 or 4 debates with everybody, including de Blasio and Thompson, they started picking up my rhetoric or my beliefs. Not really my beliefs, but my ideals, or not really my ideals, my rhetoric. You see, I talked about the criminal justice system. Not just stop and frisk, that's just part of it. The whole criminal justice system, the war on drugs, the war on people of color, the prison industrial complex, and of course, taxing Wall Street. So no one was talking about taxing the rich. Every time I spoke at one of these debates, I got standing ovations. And so everyone else saw that, and lo and behold, Bill de Blasio picked up the tax the rich slogan. Mine was taxing Wall Street. He's talking about taxing people who make $500,000 a year with an income tax increase. That will not pass. There's no chance in the world that will pass up in Albany. State legislature, which is controlled half it by the Republicans, and then you have a a Republican-leaning governor, Andrew Cuomo, very conservative, actually reactionary, hasn't given out one clemency in 3 years, even though he got back into political show business on the backs of the William Moses Kunstler Fund's Madres de Plaza de Mayo inspired Mothers of the New York Disappeared movement against the Rockefeller drug laws. When his career was dead, he jumped on our wagon, and he got very popular because of it. But now, of course, now that he's in, he couldn't care less about people in prison, about the conditions of prison, or what it does to their families. That being said, he's also a fiscal conservative when it comes to helping out poor people. And the tax to rich scheme by de Blasio is dead on arrival, and it was a specious plan that he put out there in response to my tax Wall Street, a concrete sales tax called the Tobin tax. Tobin tax, economics professor, Mr. Tobin, got the Nobel Prize, or the Nobel Prize for his economic theories. And taxing Wall Street, we could double the revenue in New York City with a simple sales tax. You pay a sales tax on your shoes if it costs more than $100. You go to McDonald's, you pay a sales tax, get a bottle of wine, go to a restaurant, laundry, everything you pay a sales tax on. Wall Street, get a car, you got to pay a huge sales tax. Wall Street pays no sales tax. And they go back and forth, and they sell tons of stock, and they manipulate it. They don't pay any tax on it. So if they did just 0.5%, which is what I'm proposing, we could raise $60 billion, which is double the current budget. So with that $60 billion, what could we do? We could subsidize transportation. We could take care of the 52,000 people who are homeless in New York City, not with these Mickey Mouse shelters, but with real housing. 52,000, 22,000 are children. 22,000 children. He's talking about giving them pre-K. Well, pre-K is not good for them unless they have a place to live. They have to have a place to live. That's the priority, is to get 52,000 people into a place out of the cold weather, out of the hot weather, and to give them jobs. See, we could create a massive FDR-style jobs program citywide, and it would be the shining light for the rest of the country, the guiding light for the rest of the country, if we were to implement with the money that's there. Wall Street's got the money. So you take that money and you create a massive jobs program. That'll take care of the Mickey Mouse crime rate that we have. And the Mickey Mouse, I say it's mostly minor drug offenses. They're taking people off the street, putting them in jail because the economy's bad. They're kind of like preempting any kind of unrest we may have. And they're putting these guys in jail. It costs $186,000 a year to put a guy through the criminal justice system and land him out in Rikers. So we have 60,000 people in state prison. The vast majority, I think like 92%, come from New York City. So if they had jobs, these people had jobs. Black unemployment is 60%. They don't want to sell. These guys are unemployed, can't get a decent education. They don't want to sell $5 bags of cocaine. They'd rather be working. But there's no jobs for them. So with a massive jobs program, we could take care of all of that. Also, free education. This stuff, my mouth is very dry, too much coffee this morning. Free education for all high school graduates. Free education, like it used to be here, up until like 1980 or something. But CUNY should be free, and everyone needs to have a shot at higher education. And they would have it with this plan that I have. And it is becoming a very popular plan. Europe is adopting it. Many of the countries in the EU are adopting it, and I expect it to go continent-wide in the next couple of years. So you have it here, the Wall Street sales tax. Now, by the way, folks, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm not looking at any cue cards. I'm just talking. I have a great record, by the way. I'm not a politician. I am not a politician. I'm a political satirist. Many of you know me as a political satirist. I was on The Tonight Show in 1984. There's a documentary on my activism, including my comedy activism. I was down in Nicaragua doing my act in front of the U.S. Embassy, where I met Mr. de Blasio. He caught me doing my Reagan. Every Thursday they had a demonstration in front of what I called Bates Motel, which was the U.S. Embassy down there, which didn't get me in good stead when I lost my passport and had to go in there and get another one. So I was doing that, and you know, in front of the embassy all the time, and George Bush Sr. and talking about Max Gomez and Felix Rodriguez and all this other arcane political humor that I was doing back then. So you got the Wall Street sales tax. You got, get the documentary by Jack Black. You can get it, called 60 Spins Around the Sun. It is on YouTube right now. It's been at Netflix. You can get that and see everything. You can see my entire life and see my activism, working with William Kunstler for many years, working with Lynn Stewart. And I ran the William Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice for 15 years at a very low salary. Not one of these big executive directors at other nonprofits. I made what the lowest person at those other nonprofits make. So I was there because I'm dedicated for social, economic, and political equality, racial equality, and that's why you should vote for me on November 5th. You got to vote for me. If you give de Blasio a huge margin of victory, guess what? You're going to be dissatisfied. He's going to think, well, I can do what I want, and I'm not going to do what they want. So don't give him that big margin of victory. You have to encourage other candidates like me. Check me out, Credico2013.org, Credico2013.org, and check my past and my program. Oh, I could talk forever about what I've done. We have plenty of stuff on the internet, plenty of things that have been written about me, and please vote for Tax Wall Street. If you can find me on that ballot, it's got a 6 font, not a 6.5 font, a 6 font, 6-point font. Okay, on November 5th. Thank you very much, MNN and Joe Friendly.
My fellow Americans, I've popped up from hell today to give a shout out to Joe Lhota for having the guts to red bait Bill de Blasio. I assure you, Joe, there's nothing to be ashamed of. After all, desperate men like you and I do desperate things in desperate times. Problem with de Blasio, though, he's a moderate, and the mudslinging won't stick. Especially when you have a guy in the race like Randy Credico, a bona fide lefty and die-hard Sandinista. It would be a real nightmare if Credico were elected. So Joe, lay off of de Blasio and smear Credico. In the meantime, Senator McCarthy and Roy Cohn and the rest of us in Satan's cabinet are proud of you for giving it the old Nixon try. And to make it perfectly clear to you, Joe, that it's okay by us if you have no sense of decency at long last.
I hear that up in Washington they're having an awful fuss, 'cause communists and spies were making monkeys out of us.